Okay, so we're recording now. Um, and I only say that because I know Madison swears a lot, so I just want to make sure. Um, okay, no more. So problem 1A is on page 1297, and what they're looking at here is, what's the difference? And what I wanted to tell this class specifically about this chapter is, if you've done Cengage, you will notice that it's very inconsistent in that, okay, if you look at with me, 5.4, 600,000, I would have thought this would have been a positive 4.8. Sometimes it's a negative 4.8. Or here, you would have thought it would have been, however you want to look at it, a $3 million difference. So what I will tell you is this, and this isn't the greatest explanation, but on Cengage, if you put in a positive 4.8 million and it's wrong, then try the negative. You obviously are going to have the right number because you can all subtract. But what I will tell you is ultimately, the only thing that really matters is this number right here. And again, I don't really care if it's a negative or a positive for as far as I'm concerned of how you label it, but it would be like this. If you look at this problem, you would say alternative 1 is more advantageous than alternative 2 by $850,000, right? We don't need to do, is it a positive or is it a negative, but so that we know which alternative is better and by how much. Excuse me here, just a minute. Is everything okay? They thought the circuit breaker was flooded to check the stop. Is Al the one that's there? Um, so what we're trying to look at here is that is what makes the most difference. These problems can all be set up many, many different ways. But as far as getting to, does it really matter what's the difference in the revenues or in the difference of the expenses and the net? I would say here, not so much. This is a very important number, and by how much. So that's, I think, is what is key. All right. So in this retail store, if you read through it, it said, it was 6 years of $300,000 of revenue, and then there's another 9 years at 400,000. That's how they get their revenues. They have the cost to operate there. It was basically $200,000 for the 15 years, and then this here is the cost of the equipment less the residual value. So it's not going to cost us $1 million, but rather $950 because there's 50,000 of residual. So what are we looking at? 1.45 million. This is the revenue from the bonds, okay? So when you look at that, that is a difference of 850. 145 versus 6, that's our difference of 850. Does that make sense? I don't want us to get so hung up on, the columns, because ultimately it depends on which column you put first or versus last. And of course, Cengage has it listed a certain way, and that's fine. But I think ultimately, if you can say it this way, alternative 1 is $850,000 more advantageous than alternative 2. Any questions on 1A? Okay. Oh, Nathan, did you have a question? No. All right. On problem number 2, what they're looking at here is, okay, so do we continue with the old machine or do we replace it? Well, if we continue with the old, of course, we have no proceeds because we didn't sell anything. There's no new purchase price, but there is some manufacturing costs, right? There is some manufacturing costs. And that they listed out in the book. What was the annual manufacturing costs? And $23,600 per year. If they replace the machine, of course, they're going to have to buy a new one. They're going to get some, so this would be like your trade in or whatever, the cash from the sale of the old. And then what is its annual manufacturing cost? So again, I'm not so concerned about this. Of course, you got to put in the right numbers for Cengage, but this is the number that matters, right? We are, in this situation, we are looking at alternative 2 is more advantageous than continuing with the old by $10,000. It was more advantageous for us to go to the new, considering the purchase price, everything, it's more advantageous by 10,200. Questions on problem 2A? All right. Then what I'm going to do here, so I'm going to scroll all the way up to number 1. Give me just a minute here.
Yeah. Well, I checked to make sure the freezer at least was still running.
Yeah, the freezer, that's on the second off.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Okay, so with exercise 1, again, what we're looking at is this whole differential again. And like I said earlier, this is the number that really matters, which makes sense. Do we go with leasing it or selling it? And again, you can set this up many different ways. That's totally fine. You know, which do you put first? But you all can calculate, you know, well, if we go with this option, we know what we got for revenues, we know what we got for costs, and we get a net number. And then we compare that to the other alternative. So I don't think we need to make it any harder than it is. And setting it up a different way isn't wrong, okay? What they really talk about going forward with exercise 3 is the fixed costs. And that's the big deal is, do we continue with something or do we discontinue it? And the big deal here is if you discontinue it, well, of course, then you don't have the revenues and you don't have all these variable costs, but this number right here stays. The fixed costs will stay, whether you do either alternative. So you can do it one of 2 ways. You can either exclude this line altogether, or if you do include it, that you make sure it's in both columns, both scenarios. So it doesn't matter, but as long as you're consistent, you either include it or exclude it. So that's the big deal. And looking at just this one here, for instance, does it make sense? You know, everybody looks at, you know, if we have this mango cola, we're losing 3.8 million. Well, we are, that's true. However, the revenues and some of these variable costs, which we would call contribution margin, right, actually does cover some of these fixed costs to the tune of 1.44 million. So it does cover some of those costs, and by getting rid of it altogether, we're going to then experience the full fixed cost as a loss. If we keep it, yeah, we're still losing, but we're not losing as much. And that's where companies make mistakes. And an example with Staples. If you go to Staples and you buy, you know, a box of paper clips, They usually don't make anything on that and probably, quite frankly, lose. But they know that you're coming in to buy other things. So what their hope is, if they see, oh, guess what? They can go in and buy paper clips for 30 cents. We advertise that. We know it's a loss leader, but by doing that, it will bring in customers to buy other things that we make a lot more on. Companies do that all the time. Walmart is very, very good at that. Here's the same thing. Do we keep the shoes or not? Everything is broken out by fixed costs. So in this case, by continuing with the shoes, we're still losing, but it's covering our costs by 45 grand. Okay. Do we make or do we buy was another one. Well, if we make it, then we're looking at direct materials, direct labor, variable overhead, and fixed. Okay. If we buy it, of course, we don't have direct materials, direct labor, or variable overhead. Then we have a purchase price, but we also have this $1.80 of fixed. And companies forget this line. And so they're thinking, oh, gosh, you know what? We'd be 80 cents ahead if we were to buy it. Well, actually, you're not. You're going to be $1 worse because you're not factoring in that fixed cost. Here again, what's key to see here is if you look at some of the other ones that we did, now it's flipped the other way around. Continue with the old or replace the new. I think it's the other way around. Maybe it's the same. But if we continue with the old, of course, you're not buying anything. You're not purchasing anything. You don't have any proceeds from the sale, but you got the variable costs. And it's a different variable cost here for replacing the old machine or buying a new one. And then you've got proceeds from the sale, the purchase price. And in this case, interestingly enough, and this is where companies don't look at this right, but we are $88,000 ahead by purchasing the new. I'm just going to throw this out here, Nathan or Madison, either of you look at this problem and say, what is the, and then if you look hard enough, you'll see it. What is the one thing that they're not factoring that everybody does and they do it wrong? If you're looking at this analysis between alternative 1 and alternative 2, what are they not talking about? Right here in letter B, this sunk cost. So what everybody does is they say, well, we had $400,000 into this thing, the old one. But the deal is, and this is what you have to remember, if we're looking at this decision today, the 28th of April, all we can do is look at what we're doing today and going forward. Everything that happened on the 27th and earlier, there's nothing we can do about that anymore. That's a sunk cost. So if you tried to look at 400 and the accumulated for a book value of 225, if you throw that into this scenario, you're going to get a wildly different answer and unfortunately wrong. That's done. And we have to just, accept our losses and go forward. So what we have to do is what can we do today and going forward that will be a different scenario potentially. So that's why you don't see the old machines sunk cost into this scenario. Certainly we talk about the 250, the proceeds from this sale, because that's something new, but we cannot consider the original cash outlay and the depreciation along with that. Let me know if you got questions on that. Again, here's another, do we sell it as it is or do we go a little bit further? And how do we know if it makes sense? Well, we look at what's our revenue differences, but more importantly, what's our cost differences. And in this case, it does make sense for us to process it a little bit further, and we'll make another extra $10 per linear board feet. One more time, reject or accept. Well, that's pretty straightforward. Everything goes away, you rejected it, don't even consider it. And then you just have to look at your accepting of the new alternative or the new option. Does it make sense? And yes, there's in fact profit. What one needs to remember is in number 13, and they don't have it in number 13, but you just have to see it. They don't talk about any fixed overhead, any fixed costs. Why? Because those fixed costs are going to be there whether we do nothing or we accept it. It's like discontinuing a product. It doesn't matter, it's going to be there regardless. So what we have to look at is everything outside of those fixed costs, because at the present time, we're not doing it, and we're going to have those fixed costs anyway. If we accept it, we'll still have it. It's just this is now going to help cover some of those costs. And that's what they're trying to get at in number 14. How low can we go with those batteries that we could offer them underneath the, accepting of the order? Well, our variable costs are $372,000. They can make 40,000 batteries on that variable cost. That means if we sell them for $9.30, we break even. We sell them for $9.31, we make a penny. We sell them anything below $9.30, we're losing. So you certainly don't want to do that. And then the last one I think that was assigned is these three different types of furnaces, and they give you the revenues, the variable costs, which we always understood that's contribution margin. You divide it by the number of units, and then it gives you a unit contribution margin. Well, that's great if everything else was the same, meaning how long did it have to be in the oven? Well, then you would say we want to sell more of type 20, right? Because it has a higher contribution margin. The problem is, in order to get that, it needs to be in the oven 12 hours versus type 10 is 6 hours and type 5 is 6 hours. Knowing that, because of the amount of time in the oven, that's only a 50 cents per furnace hour, or a contribution margin per furnace hour is only 50 cents. So we were going to want to sell type 10. You look at this, you see 9, 21, and 30, you're going to say, hey, that's the number. That's what we want. It's highest. It's the higher of the three. Well, that's not comparing apples to apples. This one actually spends half as much time in the oven as type 20. All right, it's you two, Madison, Nathan, any questions on those exercises? Oh, good. Here, I'll stop sharing here a minute. No kidding. That is excellent. Oh, yeah. Are you kidding me? Yeah. Oh, that's excellent. Of course, I have no idea what that difference is from 21 cents to the $3, but it'd be interesting to know. I'm sure it's shipping, like you said, and it's probably all of that other huge overhead, you know, because isn't Target based in Minneapolis? Yeah. Seriously. That's excellent. Yeah, that is really cool. You know, it's always kind of fun when you start to get far enough into your college career that you can start to see the everyday application, you know, and by doing that. So that's great. So wonderful. Well, do you guys have any other questions for me or how does that sound for you for going forward with our schedule? Is that okay? So you'll get a week to kind of get yourself not ready only for my class, but just to give yourself some time for your other classes as well. It's a lot. So, hey, well, it's always good to see you guys. If you need anything, don't hesitate to call or shoot me an email, and I'll see you again on Thursday. Take care. Yep.